Human trafficking is a crime against the vulnerable.
I was just too afraid to move, to do anything.
Where we see tragedy, traffickers see opportunity.
You got to remember, this is a billion-dollar industry, so this is money.
The war in Ukraine has displaced millions of people. 90% are women and children.
Я внука вывезла сюда, в Польшу, с внуками маленькими.
But working to protect them are volunteers from around the world, including Central Texas.
I am looking for brothels in Moldova.
You know, once we get this up, we're coming for them.
To learn more about this international crisis and the role Central Texans are playing to stop it, I traveled to the busiest border crossing in Ukraine, where volunteers from a Waco-based nonprofit are on the front lines in the fight against human trafficking. Right now, we're on our way to the train station near the Medica border. That's where hundreds of thousands of women and children have crossed over from Ukraine. For many refugees, this station is the first stop out of the country. But few speak the local language or know where they're going next.
So initially we have stage one of the crisis, which is everyone flooding out of Ukraine, rushing over the foot border and the train border here in Shemesh.
Noah Dellinger traveled to Medica with Unbound Now, a Waco-based nonprofit that fights human trafficking.
Yes, definitely chaos.
He's volunteering at the train station and the nearby border crossing.
We've heard it called like the Wild West, really, of women being accosted by these men into cars, not knowing who they are, but just really looking for someone to take them somewhere where they can sleep. One of the biggest reactions early on was just amazement of how the traffickers didn't try to hide themselves. Even here in the past couple of weeks, we've had situations where we've intervened right here, just a few steps away.
The United Nations defines human trafficking as a crime where someone is tricked or coerced into a situation of exploitation. This can take multiple forms, including sexual exploitation, forced labor, or slavery-like practices. Gillian Triggs, the Assistant High Commissioner for Protection at UNHCR, the UN's refugee agency, has called the Ukrainian Refugee Crisis a protection crisis for women and children, especially with so many children traveling alone. The Unbound team says they experienced this firsthand when a train arrived with children from orphanages in Odessa.
You know, 3 guards and then hundreds and hundreds of orphans coming into this train station. So our people stepped in to assist and make sure that these orphans were going to where they needed to be next, and making sure that there was nobody lingering on the outside, nobody trying to intercept any children or any people straggling on the outside. They were happy and honored to be the ones who could intervene and step in.
Because of the hidden nature of human trafficking, statistics are hard to come by. According to Triggs, it's impossible to gauge just how many Ukrainian refugee women and children might have been preyed upon by traffickers, but thankfully, so far, known cases are few. Here's what we do know. Displaced people are at higher risk of being trafficked. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime saw a jump in Syrian victims a few years after that crisis started, and their 2018 report highlights a similar trend, where traffickers targeted Afghan and Rohingya refugees. That's why volunteers at Unbound have been focusing on prevention, posting and passing out flyers with information about how to stay safe.
General tips like nobody should ever have to take your passport or your phone.
And so there's a lot of people who come and they need help, and also just sometimes hearing their stories.
Erica Chauvin lives in a Polish city near the border. She's volunteering as Unbound's translator.
И поэтому мы решили, приехать, да, потому что...
But before the Unbound team met Erica, they weren't sure how they'd communicate.
Yeah, it is a little crazy.
Я не обещаю, чтобы я перешлю там завтра, послезавтра.
Да, okay.
So can you tell me how you got involved with Unbound?
Yeah, I lived in Iceland for 2.5 years, and I really didn't have a community there. There was, like, in the place where I was living, there was no church.
During the pandemic, Erica found Antioch Church in Waco and started attending services online. Through the church, she started following 2 Waco-based nonprofits, Acts of Mercy and Unbound Now. At one point, Erica and her sister even tried traveling to Central Texas.
The main reason for us to come to Texas was to go to church, but we didn't get to go because of the weather.
They made it all the way to DFW Airport, but it was February 2021. They got caught in the winter freeze and had to get back on the plane.
I thought that it's okay, we'll come again. We'll come next time.
You thought you were going to go to Waco, but Waco ended up coming to you?
Yes, God has different ways of doing things, so He brought people from Waco here. Yeah.
She comes in with contextual experience, understanding both the Ukrainian side and the Polish side. And so I know that she's been an invaluable asset to us.
So I feel like God is sometimes preparing us for, like, specific moments in life. And so I really feel blessed that I am able to be a part of helping in this crisis.
The mood in this station, it's hectic, it's busy, but it's also very somber. You can see a lot of the women are carrying with them their pets, their kids, the luggage that they were able to take with them. And just from some of their faces, you can tell that they are carrying a much heavier burden as well.
Я внука вывезла сюда, в Польшу, с внуками маленькими. Выехала. Здесь я детей оставила.
After making the trip to Poland 2 weeks ago, this mother says she's going back to Ukraine. She tells Erica that she needs to bury her son, who was killed in the war.
Произошел обмен мертвых, погибших. С русскими произошел обмен и везут, надо делать ДНК. Везут моего ребенка. Ну, а когда война началась, он 3 года пробыл, он должен быть в дембеле, у него в июне началась война, и все. Ребенка убили. Документы все.
Ну, так жалко, это ужасно, что я не знаю, я даже не могу передать, что я не представляю.
Это ужас.
From the train station, we make our way to the border to cross into Ukraine. We bypass a backlog of vehicles stretching for miles, then walk past rows of aid tents. These are set up to welcome refugees who are crossing over on foot.
We just crossed the border into Ukraine. It's been more than 100 days since the start of this conflict now, and you can definitely see how this scene has changed. There's still a steady stream of people heading to the border, but we've also seen people heading back, reuniting with family. And one thing's for sure, just from standing here, it's hard to imagine the carnage that's going on the other side of the country.
Months ago, the line to leave stretched for blocks, and the traffic was backed up for miles. Now, the street is beginning to transform back into the sleepy border town it originally was. The transformation shows just how quickly this crisis is changing and why those in the fight against human trafficking have to quickly adapt. As refugees make their way across the border and into the cities, the landscape for human traffickers is changing. The latest figures from May show Warsaw is home to around 300,000 refugees, causing a 15% jump in the city's population. With the population boom, ads like this one are popping up, but officials warn it's not what meets the eye.
What are we looking at here?
So this is a sign that was put up within the refugee center. This one is stating, if you'd like to come to the United Kingdom, here's a QR code, let's get in touch. We can get you there within 48 hours.
And why is that such a red flag?
There's not enough information. Also, this isn't how you would get connected with being transported, that there would be no reason for you to have to go through a third party.
And this is an example, but you all said you're seeing a lot of posts like this.
We are, yep.
Complicating matters is the sophistication of human trafficking networks in Eastern Europe. The UN's Office on Drugs and Crime found well-established criminal networks operating between Ukraine, Europe, and Central Asia. The UNODC Global Database shows in 2018, Ukrainian victims were identified as trafficked to 29 countries. Half were identified in Russia, and a quarter in Poland.
It's definitely organized. Sadly, we're seeing more of that as well.
In order to meet the needs of Ukrainians who have been coming to the city, refugee shelters have been popping up in order to provide food and temporary shelter. We're on our way right now to meet the Unbound team at one of these shelters. They've been volunteering there. It's about 20 minutes outside of town.
Where should we put them? What's a good
everything else down
upstairs?
Megan Jones is a college student from Waco who's volunteering with Unbound now.
We can leave them on the desk, the info desk, where they pick out like where they want to work, where they want to move to. We were at Modelinska, a refugee center outside of Warsaw, and it's one of many in Warsaw and many in Poland. It's just heartbreaking. I mean, lifting those suitcases on the border and realizing that they were so heavy because it was everyone's life in those suitcases, and thinking about how they got all the way over here, and then just walking in, and yes, they're safe and they have shelter, but it's not a home.
Today, the group is passing out flyers about community groups they're launching.
In these groups, we also plan to just be able to inform them about trafficking, and that's just from labor trafficking, that's super high risk right now just because they're looking for jobs in a country that they're unfamiliar with.
Because of the sensitivity of this topic, the Refugee Center isn't allowing anyone to go inside with cameras unless they go through a lengthy vetting process. So of course we want to honor this. This is their home, even if it is temporary for right now. So we're going to leave our cameras outside and we'll check back in with the Unbound team when they come back. On our second day volunteering at the shelter, we meet Anastasia and Anna. These volunteers are refugees themselves.
I hope that one day I will wake up like it was all a dream.
Anastasia remembers what led her to leave Ukraine.
I couldn't sleep because of the alarms. I was lying in my bed at night, thinking whenever alarm started, I was thinking just that I don't want to die.
It was her mom who finally convinced her to leave the country. The company she worked for coordinated her trip, but all she can remember is feeling numb.
They walked with me to the railway station by hand, because first days I was like a child here in Warsaw. I was really afraid and I couldn't walk and do everything in normal manner.
Anna is from Kharkiv, a city in northeastern Ukraine, where Amnesty International has accused Russia of committing war crimes.
У нас прямо возле дома взорвали больницу. И мы с мужем туда приносили, это связано с моей работой, я работаю социальным работником, и у меня много в доме было шприцов, мазей, спирта, дезинфекторов. Мы пришли в эту больницу, и я увидела много раненых детей, людей, и это был ужас и хаос.
We were unable to find reports of the explosion near Anna's house. But according to the World Health Organization, there have been at least 200 verified attacks on hospitals and clinics since the start of the war.
Это все происходило на моих глазах, и я видела, как детей выносят просто на руках родители. Мы проезжали по улицам и уже видели те дома, где наши друзья живут, те магазины, куда мы ходим, их уже не было, они были разгромлены, разбиты. И я как бы поддалась панике, я попросила мужа после очередной ночи, где мы спали буквально в коридоре, принять решение уехать из Харькова.
Anna took this video shortly before they left.
Я коренная харьковчанка, я там родилась, жила и практически никуда,
When I moved there, I felt like a child, lost and disappointed and afraid.
In Warsaw, the women met Unbound volunteers. When they heard that the team was launching community groups at the shelter, they asked to help.
Да, бывают моменты просто, мы смотрим друг на друга, обнимаемся и плачем. Иногда просто я слушаю, иногда просто я в этот момент молюсь, чтобы Бог исцелил сердце и убрал вот эти воспоминания, весь тот ужас, который видели дети. Не нужно будет переводить.
The community Anastasia and Anna are helping to build may have a bigger impact than they realize.
One of the biggest tips for prevention is to not isolate. And so in isolation is usually when people are most often exploited.
Рабство было как 100 лет, как 1000 лет тому назад, так и сейчас, в 2022 году, это есть. Поэтому эта миссия, она очень важна сейчас.
Now, anti-trafficking organizations are warning of another shift, traffickers moving online. According to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, many Ukrainians are using social media to look for help, and they're exposing important information about themselves in the process. According to the Associated Press, Polish police arrested a man and charged him with assaulting a 19-year-old Ukrainian woman he lured over the internet. In Norway, police charged another man with raping a 17-year-old refugee who was lured through social media. Google Trends reveals another disturbing pattern. Online searches for terms like Ukrainian porn and Ukrainian escort spiked across multiple languages and multiple countries shortly after the conflict began.
That's just disheartening.
According to the OSCE, this data confirms a spiking demand for sexual access to Ukrainian women, and this demand will serve as a strong incentive for traffickers to recruit and exploit Ukrainian women at scale.
What people don't understand is that when they see the demand happening, that there are clients who are being traumatized in the background.
So our decisions do have a ripple effect.
Absolutely they do. It has an impact globally.
To learn how local law enforcement is responding, I traveled to the capital of Moldova. Despite being one of the poorest, smallest countries in Europe, this border country has accepted more than 86,000 refugees, the highest number per capita. To help train law enforcement in the latest anti-trafficking techniques, Interpol flew in a handful of detectives from the U.S., including Detective Scaramucci from Central Texas, who heads up the human trafficking unit at the McLennan County Sheriff's Office.
It's very humbling. I think that it's evidence that the methodologies that we came up with and the ways that we viewed and treated victims can really be scaled out.
To get a better understanding of human trafficking in Moldova, the investigators teamed up to survey the landscape.
We also have to look at what is the problem set we're seeing here in this country, because they're not all the same.
So if you're Ukrainian and you're coming to Moldova, where would you likely be exploited?
We're
at the main train station for the country of Moldova. You know, the importance of anybody who's coming from Ukraine over, chances are they're going to come through this area. We have to start looking at what they're doing and why they're doing it. If somebody's just hanging out, you know, are they smoking a cigarette and going back into work, or are they looking for people coming off the trains?
In a matter of minutes, the detectives were finding illegal activity.
New, unused, and unregistered.
I am looking for brothels in Moldova. I actually found that by the reviews that were left on TripAdvisor. It's rented by the hours. It says that he's woken up at 2 a.m. to shouts from half-dressed sex workers. Payments only in cash, so I mean that's pretty blatant.
Well, let's just go check it out.
Drive by and see. Yeah. It has to be easy because that's what the market is, right? If you're, say, a tourist and you were looking for paid sex, you would have to know where to go.
So it's this one, right? With the black gate?
So it's pretty secure. I don't know that the police would have the ability to just walk right up and walk in.
In searching online, Detective Scaramucci believes he may have identified a victim of human trafficking.
She said the price is 150 euro for 1 hour, and then 2 hours is 200 euro. And the interesting thing with this particular female is that she's posting sex ads here. She says that she's Ukrainian, and she has a Turkish phone number. So we have at least a link to 3 different countries just on her alone. And it really just starts lending credibility to the fact that this is potentially unlikely trafficking versus, you know, somebody doing this on their own.
So I might say something like, That's a key aspect of this training, helping law enforcement and caseworkers discern the difference between criminals and victims.
For me, the big takeaway is I want to see that light bulb click that, hey, this is possible. It is possible that this person isn't a criminal.
Here, tell me.
And to be able to use thorough investigations that are supported by data and intelligence to say, I know you're a trafficking victim, even if you tell me you're not.
As for how well their methods work, I decided to try it myself.
Data, let's see if I can find, there you go.
So this is mapping all my information.
This is all the stuff that's been exposed about you. Was that ever your password?
Yes, that was my password for everything.
Okay, do you still use it?
I'm still trying to find accounts with that password on it.
Okay, so you definitely need to change.
That's not good.
I watched as the investigator mapped my social media accounts, my emails, my leaked passwords, and then linked them with my friends' network.
So about how much time did this take you to map this on me?
Well, I just did this while we were talking.
So 5 minutes?
Probably.
Is anyone doing this now with the Ukrainian refugee crisis?
We are trying to get there, but I don't know. So the people that know how to do human trafficking investigations, those people, we need to interact with them. We need to have this dialogue of what are you doing? What's going on? What do you need? What are we looking for?
And for those online traffickers, what do you hope the message is to them?
Pretty soon they're going to know people are out here looking, they're digging, they're identifying them. And it's not going to be as easy anymore. You know, once we get this up, we're coming for them.
When it comes to human trafficking, we've seen the difference that one person can make. Whether it's fueling demand or working to stop it, we're having an impact from half a world away.